Hello and welcome to the newest episode of the New Year 6 podcast. Today I'll be wrapping up my Group of 5 conference previews. This is it. This is the last one, which means the season is so close to being here. So we'll knock out this last conference and then do a few more things, and then we'll be good to go. But just to give you a format update of how it works for these conference previews videos, just like it has for the previous 9, is I start at the bottom of the conference, work my way up to the top of the conference, and find a breakout player on the offense and the defense that I think is due for a pretty big year on their end. Sunbelt is one of the few conferences that still uses divisions, so we are going to have an East meets West conference championship down there at the Sunbelt, and we'll kick it off in the East. So starting off, the team I think is going to come in last in the East. No surprise if you followed the Sunbelt in any capacity. Team that struggled last year, they're going to struggle this year, and I don't know what the solution for success is long term, but this is Old Dominion. Now, Old Dominion, is in that DMV area, could build up a strong recruiting base and a strong talent pool in the future, but right now they just don't have those pieces together, especially on offense. Just looking at the offense real quick, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of players that are unproven. Grant Wilson at quarterback is kind of a an up in the air guy, at least in my eyes. Hasn't proven himself all that well. In the receiver room, you do have Javon Harvey, who I think is your number one guy, but outside of that, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of inexperience, and it's even more apparent at the running back spot. So my breakout player on offense is going to be the running back for Old Dominion, who at this point is going to be Kadarius Callaway. So Kadarius Callaway is a JUCO transfer, comes in ready to start for Old Dominion. I've said it. I'll say it in this video. I've said it in every other video. I don't watch JUCO football. I don't know how to evaluate that type of player, that competition. The reality is it's just it's not in my wheelhouse. But it is in the wheelhouses of these coaches that are putting these programs together. That is their job. So I trust that if Callaway is ready to jump from junior college up to Old Dominion and start, then then he's going to have a year that's worthy of being the starter. So I'm looking at Callaway to live up to those expectations, to shed that JUCO experience and kind of evolve into that next level player that Old Dominion needs to open up the game. It's a spread option, offense. You need a good running back to make that happen. So, looking to see how Callaway fits into that that offense, and how he can maybe help Old Dominion get out of the basement of the East there. If Old Dominion is going to win games this year, it's going to come from their defense. Their defense is actually pretty talented if you slice it up and down here. It's the best linebacker room in the conference, really led by Jason Henderson, who probably is the best linebacker in the conference. He carries this room basically on his own. I think the D line and the corner in the DB room are pretty middle of the road. Definitely not going to be detrimental to the development of Old Dominion's success this year. Just starting on the D-line, you have heavy hitters up and down here. Devin Brand Epps, Denzel Lowry, Amori Morrison. So, and looking at the fact that it is a 4-2-5, you definitely need that strong D-line presence to make that happen, so there's less pressure on the teams behind you. The DB room is similar. Terry Jones at safety, Taj Rael, his partner back there, Sean Asbury at the nickel. So there is a lot of talent on this defense. And when you see how Old Dominion has struggled in the past, from my recollection, it's just been the fact that they can't score. Their defense hasn't really been the problem, and it's not going to be the problem this year. And the breakout player I think that's going to come on this team is going to be one of those cornerbacks that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's going to be Langston Williams. So comes down from Colorado State, 3-star recruit in the class of 2021. So definitely looking for a change of scenery. Looking for a change of pace, change of style, new campus, new coach, and he's got an opportunity to do it. Comes in as a redshirt sophomore, 2 years of eligibility left, and looking to make a name for himself. On his new campus. I think knowing that he's going to be surrounded by some pretty good players in this secondary, it's going to evolve for Williams. Help him develop, and generally this the DB room in general is pretty young. He's a sophomore. Williams is a sophomore. Everyone else is a junior around him. Defense as a whole is very young. Only one senior that I'm looking at. So, and I think even looking at the offense without the offensive line, real quick, only one senior on the offense. So again, maybe an Old Dominion run is capable of happening in 2024 or onwards. But this is the year they're gonna take a little bit of a step back. Already struggled last year, going to struggle this year. But I think Langston Williams is going to be one of those guys that develops into your corner of the future, alongside Kadarius Callaway, who ends up as your running back of the future. But not the year for Old Dominion. Just going to have to grind your teeth and make it happen. But going to be a tough year for them. Well, moving on to sixth place in the Sun Belt East. Another team that struggled last year, another team that hasn't really found their footing, team that could find their footing at some point, just not going to be this year. It's a team that I think you could probably flip-flop with Old Dominion, in that spot, in that fight for the basement, and that's going to be Georgia State. Just south of 500 last year, ended up at 4-8. I do expect, probably around that this year. I don't expect anything spectacular coming out of Atlanta this year. It just kind of is what it is. But Sean Elliott's got to figure it out fast. He's been there a while. Doesn't look like it's getting better. So I don't know what it's going to take to fix the Panthers, but I don't see it coming together this year. That being said, their offense doesn't look too bad. I think they have a real good quarterback in Darren Granger. One of the better ones in the conference. Receiver room is top 5 in the conference. So they do have the pieces on offense to get this done. The receiver room, Jakari Carter, Robert Lewis. I am not worried about them throwing it up through the air. I think they're going to be very successful on the pass attack this year. And, I don't think Georgia State's going to have too much of a problem scoring points that way. I think their running back situation is a little bit more questionable. It's not even that bad. It's definitely more towards the middle of the conference. Probably, right around that middle there. And I'm looking at an offense that maybe ends up a little bit more pass heavy this year, unless the play of this running back steps up. So my breakout player will be that running back. It's going to be Marcus Carroll. So just looking at some numbers that he had last year. 3 touchdown performance against Southern Miss with 163 yards. Again, we'll get to Southern Miss in a little bit, but definitely kind of a step up from Old Dominion or Georgia State or etc. So definitely playing up to his weight class. A 44-yard run against South Carolina, and that's an SEC South Carolina team. That's a big dog. So if we can get that type of play consistently over the course of 12 games with the combined play of these quarterbacks and these receivers and all these talented guys out there, Carroll's going to have a big year. I know being a senior, he wants to have his best year ever, wants to hit the 1,000-yard mark. Not saying it's going to happen, but with 3 years under his belt and looking to make a name for himself before he dips out, it could happen. So I'm looking for Carroll to have a big year for Georgia State. He may not be the focal point of the offense, but he's going to be very reliable and very trustworthy to get you those big chunky yards and those first downs that you need to make it happen. Looking on the defense real quick, kind of the same deal where I think the offense is a little bit better. But I think it's a good looking DB room. It's top three in the conference in my eyes. It's Taiji Leach, back there at safety, Bryce Brown at corner, talented dudes. Let's give Gavin Pringle the other corner. Give him his moment in the sun. It's definitely deserved. It's a good secondary. Going to be hard to throw on this Georgia State defense. Linebacker room is middle of the pack, and knowing that they run a 3-4, I would expect kind of a little bit more, over the course of the season, maybe to develop, due to increased playing time, but definitely some studs back there. Blake Carroll, Jordan Veneziale, John Trey Hunter, who, is in that star nickel, but I guess in this depth chart they have him leaning more as a linebacker, but talented dudes out there, talented players on this Georgia State linebacker core. Just needs to kind of come together and tighten up a little bit. I think they just they're a little weaker in this conference compared to some of the other linebacker groups that we're going to cover. D line's where I've got questions. I think this is a bottom 5 D line in the Sun Belt. Outside of Javon Dennis, I don't know who your number 2 or your number 3 are going to be. Just a lot of question marks under who, what, and how. So that being said, I will take a breakout player on this D line. It's going to be their nose tackle. Comes in from Louisville, looking to make a splash, and that's Henry Bryant. So 3-star recruit in the class of 2020. Never really found the field at Louisville. Never really made it happen. But looking to make a pretty big impact down in Atlanta this year. And maybe the change of scenery, maybe the change of coach is what helps put this together. He's going to need to make an impact on a D-line that needs that forward presence. Got a lot of eligibility left. He is a sophomore, so 2 years left, and it's going to be exciting to see how this all comes together. But I think the D-line may struggle, but if Bryant rises to the occasion, then it'll be easier to navigate for this Georgia State defense. So I look at Bryant on defense. I look at Carroll on offense as your defensive and offensive breakout players on a Georgia State team that I think is going to again continue to struggle, continue to have maybe a down year this year. All right, so Old Dominion 7th, Georgia State 6th. These next 3 in my eyes are pretty interchangeable. If you wanted to put this next team in 3rd instead of 5th, I could see it. If you want to flip-flop the 3rd team to 5th, I could see it, however you want to do it. But next team I've got coming up, definitely solid year last year. With a first-year head coach, looking to make another impact. Year this year, looking to kind of develop upon that. I expect probably a little bit more of the same, a little bit more of that, around 500, maybe a little more. But this would be Georgia Southern. So Clay Helton came in, really set a precedence last year that Georgia Southern is here to make some waves. I think Clay Helton, can develop these guys and can coach them up in a way that the program probably hasn't had in a while, and looking to see how that turns out in 2023. The games that Georgia Southern is going to win it's going to be because of their offense. Good running back in Jalen White, and a good quarterback in Davis Brin, both probably top 5 in their conference. Receiver room, at least I think, is pretty pedestrian, very middle of the road, not detrimental, but not not going to lose them games. Definitely some talented guys though. Derwin Burgess, Khalib Hood. I'm not particularly worried about the top end talent on this team. So with that in mind, I am going to take a receiver as my breakout player. Just the guy with the least amount of experience on this offense so far, the youngest guy there, and the guy looking to build upon the future, and that would be Dallin Cobb. So, really not a whole lot of big stat line opportunities for him as a true freshman last year. 3 catches for 29 yards against South Alabama, 17-yard catch against Louisiana, and we haven't talked about those teams yet because A, they're in the West, and B, because they're pretty good teams. But I'm looking to see those types of performances for Cobb against everyone in the conference. Just based on the depth chart, I know Clay Helton runs multiple offenses, but the depth chart lists 4 receivers as starters. So to me, that means it's a little receiver friendly. So if Cobb can play a role into that, if Cobb is overlooked by defenses that are focusing on Hood and Burgess, etc., then Cobb's opportunities will come. It may not be super frequent, but enough to find the end zone, enough to make a big play, enough to keep the chains moving. So I'm looking for Cobb, to have a big year in an offense that has the opportunity to give him a big year. That's a key factor that I don't know how many of the guys I pick have that chance. So looking at Cobb to have a big year for Georgia Southern. The defense is where I got a lot of questions. I think this defense is very unproven. I think it's weird in the sense that the linebacker room is very good. That duo of Marquise Watson Trent and Kadri Jackson are a dynamic duo, top three room in the conference. And it's a 4-2-5, so you have 2 true leaders back there running this team. That being said, the DB room is very inexperienced. Outside of TJ Smith and Cam Williams at your safety spot, everything else is a question mark. The D-line is no difference. I think, really only you got is Latrell Bullard. You can make an argument for Christian Varner, but everyone else is a question mark. So with that, I am going to pick someone on the D-line, and that breakout player is going to be Deshaun Davis. So on that D end, picked up a couple of sacks against South Alabama as a true freshman, 3-star recruit in the class of 22. So a 2-sack performance against, again, one of the better teams in the conference, a South Alabama team that took UCLA to the brink. Don't overlook this team just because they're in the Sun Belt, so on and so forth. But that's a big performance to have as a true freshman against a team that won quite a few games last year. So if he's picking up two sacks against South Alabama, what's he going to do against Old Dominion? What's he going to do against Georgia State? I want to see 2 to 3 against them as well. I want to see that consistency. So, again, young guy on this team, young defense in general for the most part. So, I think Deshaun Davis is in for a big year. He's going to pick up those sacks and make it happen. So, Davis on defense, Cobb on offense for a Georgia Southern team that could be cooking with gas and building something nice for the future. But for right now, the offense will fly high. Defense is going to need to prove themselves. All right, so Old Dominion in 7th, Georgia State 6th, Georgia Southern 5th. Moving on to 4th place. This is a team that kind of came in last year, shocked the world in a sense. Came in flying high and ready to make some moves. Ready to continue to make a name for themselves in the Sun Belt. This would be James Madison. So James Madison last year, first year up from the FCS, made it into the FBS, and won 8 games their first year. That's pretty impressive, regardless of what conference they're in. That's a big jump, and kind of showed that they're ready to handle it. Weren't eligible to go to a bowl last year due to conference change when you go from FCS to FBS, can't go to a bowl game. I believe they can't go again this year. I could be wrong, but looking to see what they can do in the conference regardless. Started off real hot last year. Started off ranked at one point. So they definitely want to see that type of success again this year. I don't know if they're going to get back to 8 wins. That's a pretty tall order, but 500 and up is definitely not on the menu. I think the fact that they have the best receiver room in the conference goes a long way. Elijah Sarrett is a big time name. It's super top heavy. Don't get me wrong, but that top end talent is above and beyond what many teams in this conference have total in that room. They have a great running back in Tyson Lawton, top 3 in the conference in my eyes. So by default, my breakout player is going to come from the quarterback. And now they bring in a transfer from Arizona, lost his starting shot to Jaden DeLaura, and that would be Jordan McLeod. So guy comes in, lost his starting job, ready to make some noise, ready to make some big time, adjustment and big time plays at James Madison. Again, very hard to evaluate from losing your job to coming in and trying to make some noise. But the way that I look at it, the pieces around him are present, and that's going to go a long way to making this happen. There's only one way to look at that. There's only one way to get that done, and I think when it all comes together, when it's all said and done, he's going to have a pretty big year going into his final year here. So I look at McLeod as your breakout guy on offense. On defense, good looking linebacker room. It's a 4-2-5 back there. Taurus Jones and then Jalen Walker, a 1-2 punch that is sure to shake up offenses around the conference. D-line is below average. I think DB room is also below average. So I think if James Madison has any question marks, it will be on this side of the ball. Starting with the D-line, they're really carried by James Carpenter, but outside of him, I got questions. I don't know who your next guy up is going to be. The DB room is carried by a couple of guys. It's going to be Chris Chukwuneke and Josh Surratt. But again, outside of them, you got to figure out who's your next guy up. I think my breakout player is going to come from the DB room. It is going to be one of those corners, and it's going to be Devin Coles. So just looking at some stat line items, I see a sack and a forced fumble versus Georgia State, an interception and a pass defended against Old Dominion. So two teams that we've already brought up, two teams that we have talked about so far. So I want to see that consistently. Like, I want to see, those types of numbers all year against everyone in your conference. If you're going to beat App State or Coastal, you're going to need that type of performance. So, that's the way I'm looking at it. I think Coles is going to have to step up. I think he will step up. And, as a result of that, the defense as a whole is going to get better. Maybe take some pressure off the D-line as well. But I think Coles is due for a big year just by virtue of the experience and talent everywhere else on the field around him, and that need for him to make a big play and make a name for himself. So I look at Coles on defense. I look at McLeod on offense as your breakout players for a James Madison team that is going to continue to progress at the rate that they choose. I think it's probably around 500, probably a little higher, but no reason they're going to fall off that much this year. So Old Dominion 7th, Georgia State 6th, Georgia Southern 5th, James Madison 4th. So now we're coming into 3rd. A team with a new head coach. Team that last year certainly made its mark and made the conference championship. So I think they take a little bit of a step back this year with a new head coach. Not a drastic step back, but that would of course be Coastal Carolina. So year one guy, talented team. Obviously they've made a name for themselves. Apologies for the sirens in the background. I don't know what's going on, but Coastal is slowly building themselves up into one of the better programs in the group of 5. So, even though this year may be a little bit of a step back going from, they had 9 wins last year, I could see 9 wins this year. It's just a tougher road, but just a little bit behind the rest of their conference in my eyes right now. That being said, they still have a phenomenal quarterback in Grayson McCall. I know quite a few teams, including my Gators, were knocking on the door for him. So I think Tim Beck is thanking his lucky stars that he gets a phenomenal quarterback like that. In his first year. Receiver room is good in its own right. Sam Pickney, Tyson Mobley, Jared Brown. So you got a 1-2-3 that really makes this receiver room come alive. So great quarterback, great receiver room. That default by default leaves the running back room as your breakout room. So that for me is going to be Reese White. So I look at last year, 2 touchdown performance against Southern Miss. So we'll get to Southern Miss in a little while when we cover the West. But conference opponents, that's what you want to see. 2 receiving touchdowns against Army. That's the type of threat that you want to make for yourself as a running back, somebody who can contribute to the pass as well as the run. And he's showing us that he's doing it against quality opponent. Southern Miss is in your conference, someone that I don't know if you play specifically this year, but there's always a chance. Army is always a tricky opponent, for anyone who faces them. So the fact that he's contributing against quality opponents, shows what that capability may be. So I look to Rice to be the full-time guy this year. This is his final shot at winning a conference championship, and going out with the blaze of glory. But I think White's going to be due for a big one. On defense, this is where I think Coastal is going to have some problems. I think the defense is a pretty significant step back compared to the offense. Linebacker room is average. Don't get me wrong, you got some players back there. JT Killen, Shane Bruce. So, not worried about those guys, but that's not going to be the reason they lose games. It's not going to be the reason they win them either. The DB room, really led by Charles Arnold, but you want to see some more depth there, and that'll be concerning. But again, very middle of the road. Very very pedestrian there. The D line is where I've got some questions, and knowing that they at least on paper it's a 3-3-5. The D line is the one where I don't think we've seen the most amount of progress so far. They're kind of deep, but there's no one who's really stepped up and made a name for themselves. And the person I think who will do that is Allen Henry. So they got him right in the middle there as a nose tackle. Very limited playing time, or very limited stat line item, so I think that's more appropriate. Picked up a half a sack against Louisiana Monroe last year. 2 tackles against Gardner Webb. I know it's FCS, but you got to take what you can get. So they really don't have a leader up front. Coastal does not have that main guy in the trenches that is going to blast through a center and a guard. Henry's going to have to be that guy. Again, senior, going out in a blaze of glory. Let's see what happens. But Henry has to be that guy. So, someone on the D-line is going to step up. I almost picked Jaquan Griffin. I was on the fence between those two. But, the reality is one of those 3 is going to have to step up. Henry, Jaquan Griffin, or Kennedy Roberts. One of them is going to have to make a name for themselves. I think Allen is the most likely in the center to just, plug up runs, hit the QB, take on those double teams and do something with it. So I'm looking at Henry on defense. I'm looking at White on offense for a Coastal Carolina team that, definitely going to be a threat to win the conference. Definitely going to, be a threat to win their bowl game, so on and so forth. But should be a pretty exciting year down there. So that leaves us with our final 2 in the East here. So you have App State, who is a perennial power. You have Marshall, who came in last year. At least in my eyes, had a pretty solid year 1 in the Sun Belt. So who do we got winning? Sun Belt East? And in my eyes, I got Appalachian State moving back to the top. So I'll start with Marshall first, just to knock that out. Charles Huff is a very underrated head coach. Charles Huff is someone I look to, pretty sporadically when I look at like potential openings a year from now. Like Huff is a name that I circle to replace coaches at the Power Five level that get let go after this year. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but it's a name you may want to keep an eye on for the future. And that's with no insider information. It's just seeing the work that he's done at Marshall in his 2 years, and again with he goes out to Notre Dame and beats them with no disrespect to Marshall, but a less talented roster. It's Huff out coached Marcus Freeman. And that type of effort is big. It helps that on offense you have the best running back by far in the Sun Belt with Rasheen Ali, and that's no disrespect to these other guys out there. They're talented too, but Ali is another level. You have a great quarterback in T.J. McMahon. It's a very top-heavy offense with those two. The receiver room is the one I've got the most questions about. It's the least proven by far. I don't know who your big dog is. I don't know who your number one guy is. It's got to come out some way. But the guy that I want to lean on, the guy that I'm looking for a breakout year from, it's going to be your tight end, and I'm picking Toby Payne. So 2 catches last year as a true freshman, one of them being a touchdown against Norfolk State. I know that's FCS, but again, you got to get your reps in. You got to make do with what you got. 3-star recruit in the class of 22, so hasn't been there long enough to be put into a category of made it or hasn't. I'm looking for a big year from Payne. I'm looking for him to to develop in this offense more as one of the younger guys, and to be used in the red zone. Use him in those short yardage opportunities. Use him on those first and 7 from the 7. Use him as what he can be. Help him live up to that expectation, that potential. I think he's got the head coach to do it. I think he's got the quarterback to do it, and he's got the team to do it. So I'm looking for Payne to have a big year for Marshall, knowing that he's got 2 years after this to continue to develop as a tight end. On the defensive side of the ball, it's not quite as cut and dry like it is on the offense. Like it's pretty easy on the offense to call out that the receiver room is the one that needed the most help. In this case, it's a couple of different rooms. The linebacker room is pretty average. At least compared to the conference. I do like Eli Neal a lot. I think Keyshawn Brown is a very solid complementary piece back there, especially knowing that it's 4-2-5 defense. But the D-line and the DB room are, at least in my eyes, probably a little bit below average. So just starting with the DB room, really it's Kerryon Martin and Micah Abraham back there. So you got one talented safety and one talented cornerback, and the rest are a little younger and a little more unproven. The D-line, you have Owen Porter, who's very clearly proven and has really established himself as an amazing D lineman. You have Tyqua's Legs at the DT, and then everyone else is pretty unproven. So with that, I will take someone on the D-line. I'll take with the opposite side D-end, kid coming in from TCU looking to make a name for himself, and that's Landon Watson. So 3-star recruit in the class of 21, never really found the field for TCU. And again, TCU's high-flying right now, looking to build upon last year's unprecedented and unpredicted success. So Watson, new scenery, new campus, new coach, new team, and this is the power of the portal. There's a guy who was just buried out there in Fort Worth and wasn't going to make a name for himself. Has a new opportunity in Huntington. I think that's where Marshall is. I want to say yes. But big opportunity, to be one of the anchors on this D line here. So big opportunity to step up. I think the left side of this D line in particular is the weaker side. So they're going to need a big time performance out of this guy. So And again, as a sophomore, a lot of opportunity to learn, a lot of opportunity to grow, and learn from the guys around you who have been doing this for a while. So I look at Watson on defense, Payne on offense for a Marshall team that, in my eyes, is incredibly talented and ready to make a claim at that conference championship spot. I don't think it happens this year, but I would not be surprised if it did. So, and that leaves us with App State. So again, a little bit of a down year last year for Sean Clark. Average 6-6 year. You expect a little bit more, given what they've done since they've moved up to FBS. And I think this is the year App State goes back to the mountaintop. Just looking at the offense real quick, I do have some questions there. Don't get me wrong. I think Nate Noel is a pretty solid running back in his own right. I think the receiver room is really led by Christian Horn. So you have pieces there to make an offense that kind of comes together in that sense. But the breakout player I've got is going to come at the quarterback spot. It's the guy who's just not proven, and App State, at least in my eyes, looks like they're going to be starting a redshirt freshman, and that's going to be Ryan Berger. So 3-star in the class of 22, didn't play all that much last year as a redshirt, and looking to take App State to that next level, and I think he's gonna. I think Sean Clark is an excellent coach. I think it's a very talented team. It's one of the most talented rosters in the conference. And, Berger's going to take him the distance and, showcase why he's starting at age 19. In a conference full of senior starting quarterbacks, it's going to be the freshman that ends up taking him to the conference or the division championship. So I look at Berger to lean on those older resources around him, establish that run game, and, make it happen for App State on offense. The defense is where I've got probably a little bit more questions than the offense here. The DB room is good enough. You got Nick Ross back there at safety. Nick Ross is a very talented safety. Tyreek Funderburk is a good cornerback in his own right. So not too worried about the DB room. I think it's going to be good enough to get him going. But the D line and the linebacker room is where I've got quite a few questions. It is a 3-4 defense, so just starting with the linebacker room, it's really just due to the fact that it's very top-heavy. You have Andrew Parker and Brendan Harrington, who are two talented linebackers, guys who have been there for a while and ready to continue to make that impact that they have on App State. The D-line's kind of pretty similar. It's a little younger, and only one real experienced guy with DeAndre Dingleprince. But, if I'm looking at that D-line, I want someone who's going to step up and make a big play and make a big effort. And I do think it's going to come in the middle of the D-line. It's going to come in the form of Marcus Clark. So, true sophomore, so played considerably as a true freshman, 3-star recruit in the class of 22. Did force a fumble against Old Dominion last year, so getting his reps in and making plays against the type of teams that you want to see him make plays against. Again, if he's doing it to Old Dominion last year, I want to see him do it against Old Dominion this year. I want to see him do it against Georgia Southern, Coastal, James Madison. I want to see him go through the whole schedule doing that. And he's what prevented him from doing it last year is lack of playing time. When you're playing 5, 6, 7 games as a freshman, in more of a rotational piece, you don't get those opportunities. He is going to get those opportunities this year, and in my eyes, I think he's going to make the most of them. It's a defense that's going to need someone to step up. It's going to need those young players to rise to the occasion. It's a young team in general. A lot of freshmen playing on this team this year, and I think App State is going to make it happen. But I think it's going to come from a big year from Clark on defense and a big year from Berger on offense to put it together for App State and get them back to the conference championship. All right, so let's move on to the Sun Belt West. So kicking us off is a team that, there's no easy way to say it. Definitely historically struggles. Actually, had a little bit of a an up year last year, but I anticipate the world to come crashing down this year, and that would be ULM, Louisiana Monroe. It's going to be a tough time for Terry Bowden. I don't know how he gets out of this one. I don't know how he builds this team up for the future. The pieces are just not there right now. So, looking at the offense, Jaya Wright is pretty unproven in his own right. Hasn't had a ton of playing time or experience. On offense, you really only have Tyrone Howell, and then everyone else is younger or unproven. So I don't know how you put it together there. The running back room is again in its own right, even more unproven in a sense. But so with that in mind, I'm gonna I'll take their running back as their breakout player, and comes in from Miami looking to make a name for himself, and that would be Thad Franklin. So come down from Miami, change of pace, change of scenery, 2 touchdown performance against Middle Tennessee, and again I know first off, they lost that game against Middle Tennessee, which is hilarious. I know Florida lost to Tennessee, but Florida lost to the whole state. Miami just lost to the middle part of it. So, suck on that in Coral Gables. But Franklin there, 2 touchdown performance against Middle Tennessee. Just got beat out in the depth chart, looking to make a more of an impact at ULM this year. I think if Bowden wants to get this offense moving, they probably should lean on Franklin. I think less talented teams, historically speaking, need to be more of a run-first offense. It is a spread option, so I do expect to see Franklin to evolve with that and be a pretty prominent individual in this offense. So I think it does come together, and it. We find a way to make it happen for Franklin this year. He comes in and again as a junior, so he's got a year after this as well to establish himself as the guy for ULM. So I look at Franklin to put some tread on those tires, run the ball, and kind of get this offense moving. The defense I think is pretty similar. The only difference being that the D-line is pretty respectable in its own right. It is a 3-3-5 defense, and you do have some nice players up front. You do have Kennard Snyder. You do have Aiden Huntington. So I'm not too worried about. I'm not too worried about the pressure they're going to apply up front. The linebacker room I think is below average. Again, a little bit more top-heavy with guys like Michael Batten and Tristan Driggers. So, not a whole lot you can do with that. But, again, 2 respectable, solid players there, 2 respectable, solid players in the D-line. I just think the D-line is better in terms of where it compares to the conference. The DB room is the one I've got the most questions about. You do have some good players back there. You do have Lou Tillery, A.J. Watts, Deuce Mayberry. So there is talent back there. Again, it's just not as deep as what we see in the rest of the conference. So with that in mind, the breakout player I'm going to have for ULM's defense is going to come from that DB room. It's going to be that star, nickel, whatever position you want to call it, but the guy who's got to play a little bit up and a little bit down, and that's going to be Norman Massey. Comes in as a JUCO prospect. I don't watch a JUCO. You don't watch a JUCO. Nobody watches JUCO except for these coaches. They got to evaluate their kids. But again, I don't think you put a kid with no FBS starting experience in this role if you don't think he's ready to take it on. So I trust Bowden. I trust his ability to understand Massey in this defense and understand what role he would play. And again, this is senior year. It's this or nothing. And I'm expecting that DB room to develop upon a guy with experience. I think that's the key thing. You think about where they come from. It is relevant experience and age and maturity. So I look at Massey to have a big year. Be one of those leaders in the DB room as they come together and build for the fall, or build not build for the fall, build for the future. So I look at Massey on defense. I look at Franklin on offense. For a ULL team that, quite frankly, I think is going to struggle. They're back in the basement, and they're going to have to regroup on how they move forward here. So next team I've got up is a team that also struggled last year. Gonna struggle again this year. I think the West is very similar to the East, where the bottom two are pretty apparent. The middle three are pretty apparent, and then the top two. So with that in mind, team that struggled last year, team with a new head coach, so maybe things will be different, but I don't think it's going to happen this year, and that's going to be Texas State. So they got G.J. Kinney coming in, ready to make a name for himself. I think he's coming from Incarnate Word, so did a bang up job at the FCS level and ready to make a move. Knows the state of Texas well. I'm a believer that in a talent-rich state like Texas, programs like Texas State and UTEP can blow the brakes off their expectations. They should be the best teams in the conference. It's not going to happen this year. Not saying it's never going to happen, but not in 2023. Receiver room is at least in my eyes, it's competitive. It's decent. It's borderline top 5, probably closer to the average there. Talented guys: Ashton Hawkins, Bo Corrales. So not worried about how they're going to be at receiver. Definitely some talented guys back there. Running back room is, I guess, like a little questionable in a sense. You have Calvin Hill. I don't know how he stacks up compared to the rest of the conference. I would say probably a little bit lower than average. And the quarterback room is similar in that sense. So I think your breakout player will come from the quarterback room. And it's a name that I'm familiar with, not because Florida connection there, but general SEC. I definitely know this name. Comes in from Arkansas, ready to make a name for himself, and that would be Malik Hornsby. So really, looking at last year, he subbed in for KJ Jefferson against Mississippi State, started that game, had 234 yards and a touchdown. So quality numbers, I'd say so. Against, again, it was a good Mississippi State team last year. And the way I look at it is that Hornsby is not going to be playing Mississippi State every single week. He's not going to be playing Alabama or LSU or Texas A&M or Ole Miss. He's not going to be playing those teams. He's going to be playing ULM and Arkansas State and Troy. And no disrespect to those teams, but they are not on the same level as Alabama. I don't think there's any debate about that. So if he can have 234 against Mississippi State, can he have 334 against South Alabama? Time will tell, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in this type of offense with a new head coach, new conference, new campus, new team, and how he can put it together. So I'm going to see Hornsby break out on offense. On defense, I actually think Texas State is pretty good. They're a good D line and a good DB room. That D-line has a tank on that team by the name of Jordan Revels. So, I mean, him alone, I put him in the top 5 of the conference. Just that name alone and that presence alone is enough to boost them to the top 5. The DB room is very similar. Good pair of safeties with Torrey Spears and Caleb Culp. You have a good DB or a good cornerback there with Alonzo Edwards. So I think it's another top 5 group in the conference. The linebacker room is the one I got questions about just because it's a 4-2-5, and I review everything holistically. I think Brian Holloway is definitely a serviceable and talented weak side linebacker, but he's not the only linebacker out there. So with that in mind, the breakout player I've got from Texas State defense will be Dan Foster. So comes in from Marshall, so goes across the conference, looking to make a name for himself, make an impact. Had a pass defended against Georgia State last year, so that's That's the type of performances that we need against players or against teams in this conference. So if you're not playing Georgia State, you're playing teams like Georgia State. So again, redshirt senior, ready to make a name for himself in his final year, his first and final year out there in San Marcos. And the way that I look at it is, he's going to need to be the one to step up. He's not the only linebacker out there, not the only one that can make that happen. So, as far as I'm concerned, Foster needs to make these moves this year. I think he will. I think he's talented enough. He just needs to get that playing time, and I think he will. So I look at Foster on defense. I look at Hornsby on offense for a Texas State team that is going to struggle in year one of their head coach, but at least in my eyes, could build something very, very special down the line. So, all right, just breezing through here real quick. Louisiana Monroe in 7th, Texas State in 6th. So we are moving on to 5th. I think these next 3 teams, in my eyes, are pretty interchangeable. But this is a team last year that, at least in my eyes, I think they had a pretty good year. I don't know if they replicate the success they had last year. They probably get around it, but I would be surprised if they have just as good of a year as they did last year. And this would be Southern Miss. So Southern Miss in 5th. Ultimately, Will Hall did a good job of getting him to a bowl game, getting him to that postseason spot. But I just think there's some challenges this year that were not there last year. But again, could be building something fun for the future. The offense, real quick, I think you have Frank Gore Jr. The name precedes himself. One of the better backs in the conference. It's amazing what he's been able to do, and we'll see what he's got in the tank this year, and maybe this might be it before he declares and follows in his father's footsteps. The receiver room is really just one guy. It's Jacarius Caston, but the rest could show up. We're just looking at returning production and that type of impact that's been felt on the offense. And he's the only one that's made really any sort of that big of a splash. But the quarterback is the most unsolved question heading into the fall. It's the most unproven position, but the one that I think is going to have a breakout year. And this is Billy Wiles. So he'll be your starting quarterback at Southern Miss. Comes in from Clemson, broke the dabble rule of when you commit to Clemson, you commit to Clemson, because he said, nope, I'm heading down to Southern Miss. 3-star recruit in the class of 21. Didn't beat out DJ Uyagale. Didn't beat out Caleb Klubnik. So what am I doing here? I'm leaving. Just hasn't really seen the field, been that third string guy, but looking to be the man at Southern Miss. I think he can. I mean, Dabo's got an eye for talent at QB. And again, there's only one starter. So if it didn't materialize up there in South Carolina, that doesn't mean it can't materialize down in Mississippi. So, maybe Wiles is the guy, but we won't know until we see him play. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for him. This is, again, the power of the portal being used for good. And, Wiles is going to make a name for himself this year. Looking at the defense, I think the defense is very talented in 2 out of 3 rooms. It's the best D-line in the conference. Let's get that straight. Everyone is talented. It's a 4-2-5 defense, but everyone is a playmaker. Kristen Booth is a talented guy. Jalen Williams is talented. Quentin Bevins is talented. Avery Habas is talented. There's not a moment of doubt for me that this is the best D-line in the conference. It's a top 5 to top 3 linebacker room in the conference. Hayes Maples and Swayze Bozeman are a dynamic 1-2 punch in the middle. Again, it's going to be a tough time running the ball in Southern Miss. You are going to have a field day throwing against them, though. Because outside of Jay Stanley, I don't know who your dude is. I don't know who that number 2, 3, or 4 is going to be. So it's going to require someone to step up. And I took a transfer in the first half of this preview. Let's take another transfer on the defense, and that's going to be MJ Daniels. So comes in from comes from Ole Miss to Southern Miss. So at least he's staying in the state. Really, only notable stat line was a half a sack against Georgia Tech. So I know Georgia Tech had a pretty up and down year last year, but still a Power 5 opponent, someone that Southern Miss is not going to play. Not usually the type of caliber that they play. So, and as a nickel back, that's big that he's able to get up and blitz correctly. So, an aggressive safety or aggressive nickel back that can play all over the field. It's definitely someone that you need in this secondary to make things happen. So I'm looking at Daniels to have a big year, to help put it all together. Again, this secondary as a whole needs to grow and needs to develop. And, I think he's the guy to make that happen. So I look at Daniels on defense, Wiles on offense for a Southern Miss team that is looking to get back to where they were last year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it will certainly be in the conversation. So moving on, recapping, Louisiana Monroe in 7th, Texas State 6th, Southern Miss 5th. So we're on 4th. Team that, at least in my eyes, they had a pretty tough year last year under their mental genius of a head coach. And this is a fun one to make fun of, but I think they do bounce back this year. I think they have I think they at least have a pretty respectable year in year 3 of this head coach, and that's going to be Arkansas State. So Butch Jones, former tomato-faced head coach of Tennessee, down there at Arkansas State, and ready to continue to make a name for himself. Looking at the offense real quick. I do think this receiver room is talented. Definitely some guys there. Corey Rucker and Jeff Foreman are a duo of good receivers. So I'm not concerned about receiver targets. I'm not really worried about the running back room. I think it's pretty average with Brian Snead. So I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to be able to catch the ball. They just need someone who's going to throw the ball. And the last few picks the last few people I've picked have been transfers. Let's keep that ball rolling and know that Arkansas State also has a transfer at quarterback this year, and that's going to be J.T. Shrout. So this is the guy I think is going to break out. Comes down from Colorado, one of the Deion castaways. No one would have succeeded on that Colorado team at quarterback last year. That is not on Shrout's shoulders, but at least in my eyes, a reasonably good game against Arizona State. 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. They did not win that game, obviously, but if you can do 222 and 2 against Arizona State, I want to see 222 and 2 against Texas State. If he can consistently, make these plays, again, he was evaluated as a Power 5 quarterback. He's now in the group of 5. So the expectation, at least in my eyes, would be that he would, exceed those expectations. That he would develop as a quarterback, continuously. So I look at Shrout, to make that happen. I look at Shrout to be the guy that Arkansas State needs, to propel this team, heading into next year, which I don't know what next year is going to look like, but he can be that band-aid to help get some momentum going into 2024. So I look at Shrout to put it together for an Arkansas State defense or an Arkansas State offense. Wow, that has the resources and pieces around him to make that happen. Speaking of the defense, the DB room is very good. It's top 3 in the conference. Just looking at Trevian Thomas and Eddie Smith are a duo of good safeties. Sammy Johnson is electric at corner. So I'm not worried about anyone trying to score through the air against this team. I think it's going to come together very nicely. The D-line, I've got, at least in my eyes, pretty middle of the pack. Really just led by Micah Bland as your your leader in the middle there. It's a 4-3 defense, so plenty of talent to go around. Very evenly dispersed. The linebacker room is the one I've got the most questions about because outside of Malik Stracker, I don't know who you got. I don't know who your dude is. So with that in mind, the player I think who is going to break out is going to come from that linebacker room, and it's going to be Cruz Temple. So, guy who hasn't had really any playing time. I'm sure he's putting more on special teams than anything. 3-star recruit in the class of 21. He may be a 3-star recruit, but we all know he has a 5-star heart. And we're going to see how that comes together. We're going to see, how he developed as a linebacker. Again, there's a lot of talented players around him. In this linebacker room, in that DB room, up on the D line, there's people he can lean on to learn how to become a better linebacker and a better, starter on this team. Very little sample size or very little info to go off of as to how he will develop, but by virtue of, being in a starting situation, Temple will rise to the occasion. I'm confident in it. Someone in that linebacker room is going to have to. It can't just be on Malik Stracker. So I think Temple is going to have that year alongside Shrout on offense as Arkansas State works to build this program up brick by brick, and we'll see what they look like at the end of this year, and what Butch Jones looks like. But moving on to our final three here. So Louisiana Monroe in 7th, Texas State 6th, Southern Miss 5th, Arkansas State 4th. We are now in 3rd. Team last year that definitely had a lot of talent on it. Definitely had a phenomenal year in its own right, but I think they just fall a little short this year. It's a very talented team, but I just don't think it comes together this year, and that would be South Alabama. Just looking this roster up and down, it was hard not to put them at 1, if I'm being honest. I just like the other two. I like Louisiana and Troy just a little bit more, but this is a good-looking South Alabama team. If you put them in first, I would not have batted an eye at it. I think they got the best receiver room in the conference potentially. I think they have the best quarterback in the conference with Bradley Carter. And not to skip over the receiver room too quick, but Javon Ivory, Devin Voisin, and Colin Lacey. Even the tight end Lincoln Sefcik. It's going to be hard to stop this team, and that leaves the running back, and it's not an unproven running back. That's the issue here, is that everyone on this team is proven in some capacity, but I think the running back room is probably just the least good at this point, and that would be with Damian Webb breaking out for South Alabama. This is probably a breakout on more of the collegiate scale versus the conference scale. So I look at his game against Georgia and Southern last year, 247 and 4 touchdowns, just roasted them. Picked up a 28-yard touchdown catch against Louisiana Tech, so adds to that receiving game, is a threat that way. But I looked, he eclipsed 1,000 yards last year. Go for 1,300. It's very possible. This offense fires on all cylinders. It's a multiple spread offense, but they basically score at will. Kane Womack is, potentially one of the next best coaches to come out of Sunbelt, wherever he ends up after this. But he's putting it together right now in South Alabama. So I look at Webb to develop upon last year's performance. Really put it together one last time before he graduates and heads off to his next adventure. But he's going to want to make a name for himself to get into the draft potentially. So look to Webb to run his hardest and run as fast as he can with all that on the line. On the defense, you got the best DB room in the conference. I'm confident in that. A duo of safeties there, Keith Gallman and Jaden Voisin. I'm guessing they are, Jaden and Devin are related in some capacity. Who else you got back there? Yam Banks, in that they call it a husky, but kind of that nickel or dime back, star, whatever you want to call it. The D line is top 3 in the conference there. Wycavius Thomas in the middle there. On the ends, Jamie Sheriff and Quentin Wilfon. Even the other guy in the middle there, Charles Coleman. They're loaded with talent up front. The linebacker room is the breakout by virtue of everyone else has established themselves as a room. I think Trey Kaiser has stepped up, and even this next guy who has stepped up previously is going to break out to the collegiate level. So he's going to be on awards list potentially, and that's James Miller. Passes defended against Georgia Southern, Old Dominion, and Western Kentucky. So 2 teams in your conference, and then Western Kentucky that may have been a bowl game. Don't quote me on it, but that's a very real possibility. Sacks against Central Michigan and Texas State. So probably like a week 1 or week 2 game, Central Michigan, and then Texas State in your conference, obviously. So clearly has risen to the occasion before. I'm looking to see this guy rise to the occasion, at the highest of levels. South Alabama is a very talented team, a 10-win team last year, looking to make a name for themselves again this year. We'll see how it comes together, but I do think it's a little bit of a step back. I think 10 is going to be hard to replicate, but definitely a talented group back there. So that brings us to our final 2. It's our final 2 teams are Louisiana and Troy. So from there, who do I think is going to make it to their conference championship game? And the team I'm going to pick is Troy. So let me go through Louisiana real quick as we wrap up the Sun Belt West and then pick a winner. So year 2 of Michael Desormeaux taking over after old Sun Belt Billy made his way over to Gainesville and doing some things over there. But they took a pretty substantial step back last year, but I think it does come together again this year. I think it does piece together in a pretty big way for Louisiana this year, where even though I have them second, I could very easily see them winning the division when it's all said and done. They have a very serviceable quarterback in Ben Wooldridge. Definitely guys who can make plays and put it together if needed. It's a respectable receiver. I'm probably average to below average, in all seriousness. I think you got Peter LeBlanc, but outside of that, it's not a very deep room. But the running back room is the one I want to see a little bit more from, and I think your breakout player will be Draylon Washington. So again, limited playing time last year, 73 yards and TD against Texas State, so that's a good type of performance. 54-yard run against Georgia Southern. So he can make the big play. He can he can score against conference opponents. That's what you want to see from your guy. And if he's starting this year, which I assume he will be, you want to see that happen consistently. So I think with the pieces around him, with the spread offense that is a little bit more run heavy, Washington will put it together and will make it happen. So I look at Washington to have that breakout year on offense. Defense, I've got some questions. I do think they're a little light in terms of depth. On the the DB room, just starting off with them, really outside of Tyrone Lewis and Courtline Flowers, I don't know who your stars are back there. Kind of the same with the D line. Outside of Sonny Hazard, I don't know who your guys are there too. And then the linebacker room is similar. We're outside of KCSI. I don't know who your big dogs are. So, it's a defense with a few talented players, and the rest are very young. So the rest are going to have to step up and make a big impact. And one of those young guys that I think will do it will come from the linebacker room is Cameron Whitfield. So 3-star recruit in the class of 21. So that would make him a Billy guy. And when it comes to recruits, I don't think Billy misses too often. But 2-tackle performance against Houston was really the only notable thing he did last year. Didn't really crack the depth chart, so looking to make a name for himself, looking to step up this year and make an impact on his team. Stayed with the program when the coach left, showed loyalty to his campus, to his community, and to his teammates, and I think that's going to pay off this year. I think it's a young defense that that is looking to pay it together and looking to make a run for the future, and performance of Whitfield and that Jack linebacker is going to go a long way to make that happen. So I look at Whitfield on defense, Washington on offense for a Louisiana team that bounces back in a big way this year, and doesn't quite make it, but is going to position themselves to be a talented threat of a team in this conference for years to come. And that leaves us with Troy. So. Obviously John Summerall did an amazing job with this team in year one. Had him win the division, had him win the conference. Did all these fantastic things in just 1 year at Troy, and looking to make another impact. Again this year. Just looking at the offense real quick, the running back room is solid with Kamani Vidal. So. It's a spread offense. They're going to run it through Vidal, and they're gonna keep it churning. They have a respectable quarterback in Gunnar Watson. Get someone who can keep this ball moving, keep the chains moving, all of that fun stuff. Receiver room, at least in my eyes, is the least proven. Definitely one of the bottom ones in the conference right now, because outside of Deshaun Stoudemire, I don't know who you're going to lean on this team. So with that in mind, I want to give some love to tight ends when I can, and this is I'll pick one on Troy to make that happen, and that's going to be Clayton Owendiek. Really only notable play or only notable game from last year was you had 2 catches against Alabama A&M. And I know it's an FCS school, but you got to earn your keep somewhere. Redshirt senior, so this is it. Make a move or move on, and I think he's going to be a pretty valuable part of this offense. I think knowing that this offense is probably going to be a little bit more run heavy and run first. That Owendiek will play into short yardage situations. He'll be a blocker, be someone who runs the routes and runs routes against linebackers and safeties. Do what he needs to do to make this happen for Troy and for them to score when they need to. So I'm looking for Lindiek to again make a name for himself. Be a key contributor for Troy as they make the attempt for a back-to-back conference champion. Looking at the defense, this is where I do think Troy is going to win games. Very good D-line, top 3 in the conference. T.J. Jackson on the end, Luis Medina in the middle, Richard Jubinor in that edge position. It's going to be impressive to watch. It's a 4-2-5, but not worried about that D-line. I think it's pretty comfortable to say that it's gonna be a tough time to score against. To score against Troy on the ground. Through the air, it's going to be hard to get him. This is a top 5 DB room. Del Pettis at safety, Reddy Stewart at corner. You got talented dudes all over the place. Oshai Fletcher at the other corner. So it's a deep room. It's not super top heavy, but it's talented from position to position, which is what you want to see from that room. The linebacker room is where I got a little bit of questions, because outside of Jaden McDonald at the mic, I don't I'm curious kind of how everything else comes together. And the player I'm going to have as your breakout player on defense will be the will to his Mike. And it's one of the youngest guys on this defense that's going to be starting, and it's going to be Terry Thomas. So really only notable line from last year was he did have an interception against Alabama A&M. Again, FCS school, gotta make do with what you got. 3 tackle performance against Arkansas State, who we all know struggled last year, but again, gotta get that playing time and gotta get those reps, and he's making the most of it. So I look at Thomas to continue upon the success he had last year. Being one of these youngest guys out there is gonna develop and work as a linebacker to again continue to get that experience, get that those opportunities to come together in that way. And again, with all the talent around him on the D line and the linebacker room and the DB room, he's got some great leaders and coaches to learn from. And this guy's the future of your linebacker core. McDonald's done after this year, so Thomas has taken over, and this is the year he's going to prove why. So Thomas on defense, Lindiak on offense for a Troy team that's going to find themselves right back in the conference championship game. So that's what we got. We got Troy coming out the West. We got App State in the East. So who wins it all? Who's gonna take it home? Do we have a back-to-back defending champ? Do we have a newcomer to rise from the ashes? Who is winning the Sun Belt this year? And my final prediction is I'm taking Troy. There's just there's very little beat in what they've put together out there. No disrespect to App State, I think they're gonna have a very respectable year. But the defense that Troy's put together, the firepower they've got on offense, the great coaching they've got from Summerall. Summerall is another one to look at as your potential next great coach coming out the Sun Belt, and he may be eyeing some FBS or some Power 5 jobs when it's all said and done. But looking at Troy, looking to make that happen, and should be an exciting year for quite a few teams in the Sun Belt. Very talented conference when it's all said and done. But that concludes this episode of the New Year's 6 podcast, and that concludes the final conference preview of the 2023 season. Next week, I am going to do the independents. I'm going to count it as a conference, but there's only 4 of them, so it's going to be independents next week, and I'm going to add a little something on it, so it's not just a quick little episode. We're going to go a little bit more in depth into something fun. So tune in next week. Again, appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you getting all excited for the football season, and we will be there soon.